Is the monster real? Johan Liebert is the main antagonist and most propelling character in the beloved anime Monster. Monster is a story that you're probably already familiar with, but if you're not, I'll give you a really quick synopsis. It's about a doctor named Dr. Tenma, who, along with other side characters that we'll talk more about later, go on a journey to stop a prolific and mass killer named Johan Liebert. Tenma feels that it is his direct responsibility to stop Johan because he saved Johan's life by performing surgery on him as a young boy. That responsibility to stop Johan makes Tenma responsible for countless gruesome murders. Johan is the monster in practically every sense. He is cold, detached, and seems to embody the very essence of evil. Many people in and out of the story even believe that he is the symbolic representation of the devil. Johan is handsome, charming, and wildly intelligent, but he uses all of his gifts to manipulate and exploit people in the worst ways imaginable. And this all perfectly aligns with the Bible's description of the devil, which says he'll come disguised as an angel of light. However, I do not subscribe to this notion that Johann simply is the devil. I think that's far too simple and straightforward of a characterization for such a complex and multifaceted character. You see, for Johann to truly be the devil, he'd have to be one-dimensional. He'd have to be evil because that is his only nature. It always was and always would be. But Johann is different. He's a character who is struggling. He's fighting an internal battle that no other characters can see, and even has glimpses where kindness and compassion crack through. Now, by no means am I saying that Johann was a good guy. I'm not even saying that he wasn't born evil, but I think that the common notion of him just simply being the devil is blatantly false. But then what is Johann, and why is he a monster? Well, to answer this question, we need to look back at the title of the video. Is the monster real? In a metaphorical sense, yes, the monster is real. Because even if calling Johann the personification of the devil is unfair, comparing him to a monster for his cold-blooded murderers is probably being generous. So I think the real question that is the key to uncovering the truth behind Johann's actions and who he is as a person can be laid out as, is Johann real? This may seem confusing at first, but if we take a look back at Johann's tragic childhood, I think it'll all start to make sense. Johann was born as the product of a eugenics experiment conducted by the German government. The goal of the experiment was to create the perfect human that could lead Germany into an era of global domination. Johann, along with his twin sister Anna, were seen as the perfect outcomes. They were beautiful geniuses that were just as physically and socially gifted as they were mentally. However, these unusual circumstances ended up stripping everything away from them. Johann and his sister were not given a name because they were seen as experiments rather than people, and their normal childhoods were quickly robbed from them as they were forced to go into hiding with their mother while the government looked to confiscate them for more testing. But it was during this short period of hiding that I think Johann really began to change. You see, the German government was so desperate to get back their perfect set of twins that they began searching and interrogating townsfolk to find out the location of any twins that could potentially be their target. In an attempt to combat this, Johann's mother decided to dress Johann as a girl and treat him as her daughter, so that she could go out in public with one child at a time and trick everyone into believing that she only had a little girl, since Johann and Anna now looked and acted like identical people. But Johann, who already lacked a name, was now stripped of his natural appearance and sense of self, because he no longer was the little boy he was born as. Instead, he was his sister, who also lacked a name, but at least got to dress and behave like herself. But Johann never could be himself, because doing so would risk their entire family being caught by the government. So he suppressed and hid himself until he eventually lost any semblance of who he really was. This had a monumental effect on Johann, causing him to truly believe that he was his twin sister. And this delusion became exponentially stronger and more damaging when Johann's family was eventually caught by the German government. Immediately, Anna was taken away for more experiments, their mother was kidnapped, and Johann was forced to remain at home all by himself, traumatized and with nothing but a book about the nameless monster. This is when the fundamental shift in Johann's character takes place, and he truly loses any sense of self that he may have retained. During this time, Johann, like I said, has nothing but the book of the nameless monster, and he feels as though it is the only thing in his life he can relate to. So he reads and obsesses over the book for weeks, with no one to stop him. Eventually, Johann comes to the conclusion that he is the nameless monster. He has no name, he has no family, and he has no sense of self. He is a monster that lacks any purpose, so he decides to kill everyone in the world just like the nameless monster does in his book. This may seem silly and overdramatic at first, but it's important to realize Johann had been through immense trauma and brainwashing up until this point. He is so lost, in fact, that he truly believes he is not real. If anything, Johann sees himself as the shadow or spare side of his sister, since he was the twin forced to mold into his sister's image. But eventually, Anna escapes and reunites with Johann, where she promptly tells him about the horrific experiment she endured at the Red Rose Mansion, which Johann, who truly believes he is an extension of her, internalizes and confuses as his own memory. These false memories go on to torment Johann throughout the entire rest of the story. However, quickly before we jump into a later part of Johann's life, I want to clarify that Johann, while seeing himself as an extension of his sister, does not actually see himself as Anna Liebert. Instead, he views both himself and his sister as two sides of the nameless monster, an entity that is one and the same, and without purpose or identity, making them both, as Johann outright states in the story, not real. And since Johann believes he himself is not real, he decides to follow the nameless monster's path and begins killing mercilessly. And the purpose for all these killings are revealed in a bone-chilling quote when Johann says to Dr. Tenma, "Only one thing is equal for all, and that is death." Killing everyone else in the world is what Johann sees as his only way of being equal, his only way of mattering in a world where everyone else is real but him. Now that we've gotten to the bottom of how Johann became the monster, we get the answer to our original question. The monster is both real and fake. Johann truly does become a monster, but it is only because he is so lost and demented that he truly believes he is not real, creating a beautiful paradox where the man who is a monster's belief that he is not real is the very thing that makes him a real monster. Now, at this point, Johann may very well seem like a victim more than anything else. And while I do want to qualify his actions, I do not want to justify them. And the reason for this is best demonstrated by Johann's sister, Anna. In reality, Anna endured just as much trauma and manipulation as Johann, or even more, but its effects are much less severe on Anna's perception of reality than it is on Johann's. And I believe there are two main reasons for this. Even though Johann seems perfect on both the inside and outside, he does have a weakness. Despite being incredibly emotionally intelligent and filled with resolve, Johann cannot process his own trauma and feelings, which is incredibly ironic that the man who can control others completely can only pretend to control himself. And this leads to the juxtaposition between Anna and Johann. While Anna comes to a similar conclusion as Johann, believing that in some sense she is a nameless monster, she accepts it and decides to find purpose in a life despite not really knowing who she is at the moment. However, Johann is not able to accept this, partly because of his inability to process trauma, but also because of his predisposition to darkness. Even though I claimed in the very beginning that Johann was not the true devil, that doesn't mean that at least part of him wasn't born evil. While other characters that grew up with similar circumstances to Johann, like Grimmer and his own sister, decided to choose a path of kindness and redemption, Johann didn't. And we can't just justify that. Because as much as trauma and pain shaped him, it also revealed what was already there underneath. And while Johann was not born a monster, he was born with the affinity to become one. If we take a look back at Anna, I don't think it's possible, no matter how many experiments she endured or how much trauma she faced, for her to ever become a cold hearted monster like Johann. I think she herself would have broke far before she ever reached that point. But Johann was different. He was not the devil, but neither was he just a victim of circumstances. Instead, I think the best way that we can define Johann is as a combination of the worst circumstances and the most unstable subject, which did not make him a monster, but pushed him into the path of becoming one himself.